Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Week in Nintendo, Good Vibes Gaming's Nintendo podcast. I'm Brandon Miracle, and today I'm joined by Steve Bowling and Daniel Alba to discuss all of the big Nintendo stories from the last couple weeks in this case, because we were on holiday break, but now we're back. Last time I said we would talk about Nintendo in 2025, and when I first said that we were going to do that, I had a very different impression about how we were going to approach that. But over the last couple of weeks, Nintendo's leaky pipes have completely burst, and Nintendo Switch 2 is just out there. And we've technically seen it, I guess. Steve, what do you think? The Switch has been blown wide open.
Yeah, the Switch 2, we know the name is the Switch 2 now. It's not the Switch successor. It is absolutely the Switch 2. It's been essentially revealed by everybody but Nintendo at this point. It's a weird situation to be in because there is still that infinitesimally small chance that none of this is accurate, but it would be so hard to believe at this point because it's no longer just smoke. There's actual fire here. We've seen Joy-Con, we've seen the console itself, we've seen the dock fully pictured in non-blurry photos. And it's worth mentioning that the last time we met to record, I was very much on the next handheld is fake train. But that has since I've been proven wrong there. Next Handheld's information was the first legitimate Switch 2 leak, and I still don't quite understand how they pulled it off because there's very clearly some AI generated bits to the images that they posted, but I'm guessing they maybe photoshopped the console out of the original picture and then generated an AI background to obfuscate some details.
They're clearly hiding wherever they actually took the photo.
Yeah. And I mean, it's not just that, right? CES happened, the Switch 2, a Switch 2 kind of was shown there. Accessory manufacturers are all kind of now just showing off their Switch 2 stuff. So there's loads of stuff out there now. It's just, I didn't think when we went on the holiday break that we'd come back to everybody knowing exactly what this console looks and to a degree feels like.
What do you think about all this, Daniel?
It's been wild to see. We've never had this before in which we've had a console just completely blown the lid over before anything officially was announced by Nintendo. We've had documents of something before, for what was the NX. We've kind of had an idea of what it was going to look like, but we never had something so concrete as with the Switch 2 in terms of the dock, the Joy-Con, all the little features down to what the shape of the kickstand is going to look like. Just we know everything about this except for the official reveal itself at this point, and it's been wild to be a part of this.
Yeah, this feels like a historic moment for Nintendo, and maybe not in a way that they were hoping for. This is wild. I thought Satisfy was ballsy for what they did. With their accessory reveal, because they were the Switch 2, that's inside that little mock-up there. That's what it is. And then you have Genki out here just throwing entire renders of an unrevealed platform on the internet, at least until yesterday, where they claimed that they were based on the mock-ups and that they actually haven't seen it at all, which we kind of suspected, but was a wild turn for them to just come out and say it.
Yeah, it's an interesting situation because I do believe that accessory manufacturers such as Genki, who don't make Nintendo licensed products at all, I believe that they likely have not gotten their actual hands on a physical Switch 2. But to be fair, before we went on the break, D-Brand was saying that they did, that they 3D scanned an actual Switch 2. So in the case of their stuff from the last episode of The Win at the end of 2024, D-Brand was saying, no, we didn't just use mock-ups. We used an actual Switch 2 to make our products with, which you can choose to believe or not. I kind of err on the side of, not believing just because I don't know how. If a company like D-Brand could get their hands on a Switch 2, and yes, they have millions of dollars, I have a hard time believing some other multi-millionaire YouTuber out there like Linus or MKBHD, who doesn't have any interest in keeping a relationship with Nintendo wouldn't have found a way to get their hands on this and post it on the internet. Like Woods famously got the Tears of the Kingdom Switch OLED from China, months before it was even announced, and just kind of sat on it until Nintendo announced it. I have a hard time believing that there isn't a YouTuber out there who is willing to battle the Nintendo ninjas and put this thing out there if it's easy enough to get, that a company like Dbrand could actually get their hands on a final unit.
It's kind of tough. Like, Nintendo is obviously very litigious. We've seen them sue for less. But like you said, you have someone like Linus who is like notoriously willing to do things that the companies that he's doing them to are very not happy about, like especially Microsoft. There was a video recently about how to pirate Windows 11, which I thought was hilarious. But yeah, some of the things in all this don't add up. I feel like some of those channels would be shouting from the rooftops. Instead, we have other channels shouting from their living rooms.
I don't know what
the
you're
crazy
talking
thing
about.
is that there's just not much Nintendo can really do about it at this point. Like they can deny and they can say that this isn't the official release, but they can't really say that they're wrong.
It's funny too, because they did say that. They said that yesterday.
Well, that was that was the official. That was reporting from Genki, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Nintendo issued an extremely soft denial about CES 2025 and Switch 2 products showing up there. Just basically, and all they said what amounted to, these are not official. And that's not saying that what you're seeing is not the accurate design of the Switch 2. It's saying these aren't official accessories, which literally in corporate legalese speak just means Nintendo did not license these accessories. And that's it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, Nintendo would have nothing to gain by saying it's not real. Honestly, there might be a little blowback if they said it wasn't real and ended up being real. So I think they made the right call there. Nintendo did the bare minimum in this situation because, like Daniel said, what can you really do? The lid's been blown off. Multiple companies have jumped in on this now, and it's just kind of, there's no going back. So why fight it? Just gonna let it happen, and then the Switch will be revealed officially, and then Nintendo can say what they have to say about it, which I'm far more interested in than just what it looks like.
Yeah, at this point, it feels like we know enough about the hardware, and we have learned a lot about the hardware through leaks. But what we really still don't know, for obvious reasons, is how it performs, what it will do to backwards compatible Switch games, which we already know work. If there's a new card format for Switch 2 games, how much data can these store? Is micro SD Express actually on the console, and does it impact load times for original games? Not to say nothing of new games. And probably most importantly, what is the launch lineup for this thing?
Yeah. I mean, I think we're all kind of leaning in the Mario direction, I think. Daniel, what were you going to say?
So yeah, like no matter how much we see, I feel like nothing's really been spoiled, because as far as like seeing the outside of it, like that's what it looks like. Like sure, that's great. And as far as what Steve's saying, like everything on the inside is what we're more interested in. Like how is performance going to be? What is all the little minute details going to be when this releases? But the main thing for me, honestly, is just like what are the games that they have planned? We know nothing of the lineup as of right now. And it probably is going to stay that way because, like, it's not the same as, for example, a Nintendo Direct, in which you have a lot of hands going into this. You have a lot of exchanges between people, and it's a lot easier to be leaked. But this is very much a lot more internal. Like, they're not going to get this out until, like, the actual day that we start seeing news on it. Or at least I feel like it would be a lot harder for news of this to be leaked out when you're talking about, the grand reveal of an entire generation of console and games.
It's interesting too when you say internal, because we have seen what I believe to be the actual motherboard on the internet. We've seen the SoC. It does have a micro SD Express compatibility. We saw the game cartridge insert, which didn't really tell us much outside that it uses cartridges still, which we kind of figured because it was backwards compatible. but it did give us like some insights into how performance might be. Like with DLSS, it sounds like Nintendo might have their own version of DLSS. There was a patent recently that goes into some of the ways that they're going to use that. Even down to like how models are shown on screen. Like, you know, some games will use like a low res model when it's too far out in the distance to really see clearly. Like there's a new version of how that works. And there's a video on Digital Foundry that they kind of dive into how that all works. And I just found that interesting because everyone's talking about DLSS 3 or 3.5 and now 4 was just announced. And I'm like, I don't think it's that simple. I don't think we're just going to get DLSS 2 or 3 or 3.5. We're going to get Nintendo's weirdo DLSS that has some kind of like proprietary element to it that works on Nintendo Switch 2.
Well, it makes a lot of sense, and I've been saying this for years, but consider the fact that Nintendo is likely NVIDIA's largest client. I mean, they sold darn near 160 million NVIDIA SoCs. And so it would behoove NVIDIA to kind of, you know, do something special for a client that brings in that much money for them. So I do anticipate that this will be some special type of DLSS only because, you know, when you're talking about DLSS, we have to be clear. You're talking about the RTX 20 series GPUs and up. NVIDIA just announced the 50 series at CES this year. And those are very expensive boys. Like any one of those GPUs costs as much as like 4 Nintendo Switches. So to say that, you know, I doubt they're grabbing like the off the shelf version of DLSS that is designed to run on multi-$1,000 GPUs and just putting that on this little baby chip that's inside the Switch 2. Instead, it would make sense that they would have kind of a different version that's more optimized for a mobile chip. And that also, one of the cool things that Digital Foundry said in their video when they broke down the patent is that it sounds like the Switch version of DLSS, if it is true to the patent that was filed, which to be fair, Nintendo patents lots of stuff and lots of it never happens. Right. But if it's true to that, it would use multiple different like learning models in order to kind of change the level of detail dynamically based on how much load the console was under at any given time, which sounds weird, but from a battery and heat perspective, that's like a really good way to manage those for something that you might be holding for hours on end.
One of the things about the original Switch that, you know, people criticize a lot is the clock speeds. Like they don't run very fast because, you know, there's power draw and heat considerations to make there. And we've learned, thanks to Laura Kate Dale, that the charger is a 60-watt charger. The Switch 1 is 39 watts, so there's quite a bit more juice it needs to be packed with in order to run. But some of the elements of Nintendo's version of DLSS, like you said, make it easier on the console's battery, which means that there's a little bit more headroom for, you know, overclocking the system. And I'm curious where Nintendo will land when it comes to that, because the Switch 1 can do some pretty impressive stuff if you overclock it. There's a lot of videos online that show how it operates.
Yeah, I mean, one of my favorite things is Digital Foundry. Again, I love these guys. I go to them for everything tech related, but they did a video in which they overclocked Link's Awakening, which is a notoriously like performance issue riddled game on the original iteration of the Switch. And they just overclocked the CPU and suddenly that game ran perfectly. Like no frame drops anymore, nothing. And so it'll be interesting to see if Nintendo kind of took note of that over the last 8 years and maybe was a little more loose with the clocks. I have a suspicion that Switch 2's bigger size is to allow for more thermal conductivity to kind of allow for higher clocks in games to address issues like this, because you know, people get on me for this, but the Switch era is probably, I don't want to say the worst optimized, but we saw more frame rate issues from first party games in this generation than I think in any generation prior.
Since the N64 at the very least. I'm looking at Ocarina running at 22 frames per second.
Yeah, we've had so many titles of the entire Switch generation, from Breath of the Wild all the way now to games like Echoes of Wisdom. We've had games in which performance has just kind of dipped and not been stable for many of those titles. There's been some where they've made their compromises. Like, for example, everyone talks about 1,000 Year Door. That one is at a locked 30 frames per second. When on the GameCube, it was at 60. But if overclocked, if they took the limiters off, so to speak, that would be able to run at a much higher frame rates, and that's something that people are looking forward to and hoping that will improve with the Switch 2 and all of its hardware improvements and whatnot.
You're going to see a lot of those improvements just in games that are uncapped on Switch 1 already. John did a great video on that that you can find on the channel. So like you'll see some of that performance just naturally from some of the games we already have, and I'm very curious to see what that looks like for something like Age of Calamity, one of my favorite Switch games, but it runs like absolute doo-doo.
It's a slideshow if you're doing like 2 players, right? Is that how bad it is?
I got 9 FPS in 2-player in that game. Down to 9 FPS. That's insane for a Nintendo platform. An older Nintendo would not allow such a thing, but alas, here we are. But yeah, I think performance is something that even once we have the reveal of the Switch 2, I don't think we're going to be clued in on a lot of that. I think we're going to get a very quick, look at how clean Breath of the Wild looks. All right, look at this other new game that we got. And that's all they're going to say about it.
I agree with that largely. I think that they're going to definitely point to maybe a specific game or two that look and run better on Switch 2 in the reveal. But I don't think they're going to. Nintendo loves to gloss over some of these things that are traditionally the most exciting, but I also think there's room for a lot more. There's one thing in particular, and I apologize if I'm jumping ahead, that really intrigues me about the Switch 2, and that is that one particular leak showcased a headphone jack on presumably the Pro controller.
Yeah.
Which I think there's so much to show, like in terms of features. That to me at least indicates that maybe we'll get messaging or voice chat, which it's 2025. I really hope we do.
On-system voice chat would be magnificent. I would desperately hope they go one step further and have Discord integration, because we have that on Xbox and on PS5. And finally, when I'm playing like a cross-platform game on my PlayStation 5, we all typically prefer to use, party chat if we're just playing on PlayStation. But I have friends who are on Discord. I'm on Discord. So we just all hop into our friend channel and Discord, server, and now we can all chat, and it's glorious. And I just want Nintendo to stop being so snobby and just let it happen.
They keep doing their own thing, don't they? I mean, we have the Nintendo Switch app that I use exactly one time, and it was a miserable experience, and I'm not going to do it again.
Yeah, that's kind of how it is with Nintendo. And I don't think, I think it's a lot of hopeful or wishful thinking to think that Nintendo is just going to get everything right out of the gate. It seems weird, because if it was Sony or Microsoft even, I would be like, oh yeah, voice chat messaging, nailed, got it. With Nintendo, I'm like, there's going to be a weird twist to it that nobody's going to want. There's going to be some just out of left field thing they're going to do that's like, just makes it too cumbersome to use. But it'll still somehow be like a baby step forward towards modernity in a weird way.
We're going to go back to Wii U voice or video chat, where when you end the call, you wave goodbye as you disappear into the nether.
Right. John and I did that in a video just a couple years ago, but yeah, it's there's a weird quirky charm to Nintendo's I guess I'd call it like software design, because it's not really UI design when you have to wave bye to someone at the end of a call, but I hope that some of that comes back. I hope that with the Switch 2 we get Nintendo's kind of weird side into the UI a little bit. The Wii U had the Mi Plaza, and the Wii had the channel interface, and even the GameCube, which Daniel did a really cool like GameCube style intro for the channel recently, had just the weird cube that played like the really slowed down Famicom Disk System music. Like, I want Nintendo to just put a little bit of that weird back into the Switch OS, because I feel like Switch 1 OS was as bare bones as it was because they wanted developers to have all the headroom they could for the games. I feel like with Switch 2, they they could maybe design it in such a way that maybe just a little bit of that power is reserved to make the OS weird again.
I think there's a good chance that's going to happen because, the Switch 1 has 4 gigs of RAM?
Yeah, I think so.
One of them was dedicated to the UI and everything, the OS. We have 12 gigs of RAM on the Switch 2. That's a pretty big increase over what we had before. And I think that will allow them some headroom to play a little bit with the Switch 2 UI. At the very least, I think it'd be cool if we could have themes again.
What do you mean? Switch 1 had themes. You had light and dark.
Yeah, it has 2. Whoopee.
Still always mad that they didn't just title it light mode, dark mode, because that's all it meant to be. Even though it's a huge menu that had room for a whole bunch, it's just you're like, what mode are you? And they never did anything beyond that, which is still wacky because how hard the 3DS went with theming. They had their own shop for it. There were some games you could play and you can like get a personalized theme from playing the game. They had like the Badge Arcade where you could design the entire UI yourself with little icons and sprites, like that kind of stuff. I'd love to have again. Totally extra, but it helps to make your console feel like it's just personalized to you, and I always appreciated that.
I think it really is just a matter of it was going to be too much of a performance cost because like if you're playing a game and you go to the eShop or the Nintendo Switch Online app on console, they run like absolute garbage.
Mm-hmm.
The Switch is struggling to get those things working if you're playing a game. The Switch Online app will even tell you when you load it up while you're playing a game that playing the game is going to make it run worse. Like,
yep.
They're squeezing a lot out of this little system. And the improvements on Switch 2, just with RAM alone, is going to afford them a lot of wiggle room there.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I think that it'll be interesting to see. I think that these are the most important bits for a reveal, like we mentioned earlier. But we still do know like quite a bit more that we haven't even talked about yet about the hardware from all the leaks that have come out.
Oh yeah, we did get to see what the console looks like, and there are a couple standout things. If you peruse Reddit at all, and you've been on r/Nintendo Switch 2, you will see the collective downfall of mankind happening before you. I'm joking. I was the same way before the Switch 1. Like I totally get it. It's all in good fun. For most people, it's all in good fun. But one of the things we learned is that on, the right Joy-Con, there is a C button under the home button. It's just labeled C, and that subreddit has been dedicated to trying to figure out what that means. What does it mean, Daniel? You tell me.
It stands for, well, I originally thought it would be like camera, but we already have that button on there. It's already meant for like media and whatnot. So what if C just means community? And that's how we're going to get things integrated that relate back to like Street Pass and whatnot. I'm pulling at I'm hoping here because I really want to have that kind of integration back again where it's more like a social aspect than anything else. And just pressing it, you can go immediately to like a new style of Miiverse and you can post your screenshots and do that sort of thing. Because I'm trying to figure out what kind of use it would have within a game itself. And I just can't figure out what. We haven't had a C button since the N64, and that was just because it had all different arrows and whatnot. But
I mean, I'm with you. It has to be some kind of system level function and not a game related function.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's why it's way at the bottom compared to the other face buttons.
Do you have a guess, Steve?
I'm not sure, but I wonder if possibly it could be like a calibration button for either gyro controls or something like that. It's not sexy and it's not fun, but like I think about games like Metroid Prime 4, which is gotta be a Switch 2 launch title at this point. And I think about maybe they wanted to improve the gyro functionality because the Switch 2 or the Switch Joy-Con have like built-in pointer functionality, kind of like very rudimentary, nowhere near as good as the Wii Remote pointer functionality. And I wonder if maybe that's a quick way to like, if you're using it like a pointer, to recenter it with a physical button that's dedicated on the device to bring you back to center. Because a lot of games would have like a, pause the game, then do this, and it will recenter your Joy-Con pointer or do some button combo on the Joy-Con to recenter it. I wonder if this might just be a dedicated button and they're going to rely more heavily on pointer functionality in certain games. But it would feel really weird to have a dedicated button that wasn't, like you said, a system level thing. And
it's also only on the right Joy-Con. So like lefties would just be left out. No pun intended.
I would disagree on that because I am a lefty. And during the Wii U era or during the Wii era, I always played with like a nunchuck in the left hand, and whatever I had to point with, I would still use my right hand. I don't know why I was like that, but it feels, at least for me as a left-handed person, very unnatural to like use my left hand to like point at stuff with a Wii remote. I don't know if that would be true, but you know, there was it's now debunked, but there was a leak since it's debunked about a social media app for the Switch 2 called Vidmeo.
The icons were debunked. The whole concept, maybe not.
That's true. And I could see that if there is some type of Miiverse built-in thing, like Daniel said, maybe the C is a community button, and then you hit that and it shares your video clips out. Like maybe it's like the PS5 has a dedicated share button. And the Switch has a screenshot button, but it's not really like a sharing button. So maybe it, you know, you take a screenshot with the old screenshot button, and then with C, it brings up like a share option to where you can post it to Bluesky or Twitter or whatever. I doubt Twitter since Nintendo canceled that. But maybe to some other Nintendo owned social media app where you can just scroll video clips, which if it's fake, I'm really sad about it because I would love for that to be a real thing. Like the idea of just scrolling people's fun, like game clips and not have to hear about the atrocities of Earth at the same time would be nice.
Metroid can't crawl. That's some nice water.
Yeah, Steve mentioning the whole gyro functionality. I could probably see that as well because I played Metroid Prime Remastered with every possible functionality I could, but even using the Joy-Con as it is, I found myself having to constantly reset the pointer because it's not as exact as, you know, having the sensor bar for using it on the Metroid Prime trilogy, for example. But then you get a game like Skyward Sword on the Wii. So that one actually doesn't really use the pointer. Like it kind of still uses a gyro kind of function, in which if you want to reset it, you just have to press down on the directional pad, and that would reset it back to its center. And that's something that I guess they kind of only lean into that towards the very end of the Wii's life cycle because that was one of the last games the major games to release on there. And I haven't really had something like that since then. And if they had that kind of functionality with Metroid Prime, I think I would have been able to stick with it a little bit easier because you have to kind of like do something else to reset it. But having a dedicated button for that would be interesting too, I think.
For me, I played Metroid Prime Remastered on Pro Controller with twin stick and gyro enabled. So I never really had to recalibrate gyro because I could just use the right stick to recenter myself.
Yeah.
But I could definitely see how that would be aggravating to have to constantly do that, especially if you wanted the Wii-like experience on the Switch. But I saw some people on the subreddit suggest that C meant cast, and I thought about that for a while. So like casting from the Switch back to the dock. So like almost a reverse Wii U situation. Instead of going from the console to the screen, it's going from the screen to the TV. And I don't know, like Nintendo used this concept before and they anchored an entire system on it and it didn't work. But I'm curious how doing the reverse might work. Like what kind of functionality could you get out of having that as an available feature?
So that's something that I've thought about. Over the years, I've mentioned that I felt like a 3DS or a DS virtual console or NSO app would be interesting, but it would be like in its greatest form if you had the Switch in your hand as the second screen, and then the TV was like the top display of the DS, right? Because having two screens, unless you're holding the Switch sideways, would feel very weird. Like I don't think it would utilize the screen space very well just because the aspect ratios are so different. But technologically, like when I think of it, I think that sounds really complicated. Like I have,
Mhm.
an iPhone and I have a TV that I can cast to. And in fact, I have 3 TVs I can cast to. I have 3 different LGs in my house that all have that functionality. And it works maybe 15% of the time. And I'm like
I
a
have the
very
same
technical
experience.
person.
Yeah.
Like I know how to troubleshoot stuff, and it's just frustrating technology to use. So oftentimes I just go to the YouTube app and then just find the video again because it's way less hassle. And I have to wonder if a company that is, I mean, Nintendo is clearly technologically savvy, but they also tend to be like several years behind like cutting edge stuff. I wonder if a company like Nintendo could pull off making that work seamlessly in a house where you have more than one console and more than one dock. Like my wife, for instance, is definitely buying a Switch 2 day one, as am I. So how is my Switch going to know that I want to connect to my dock and not maybe a dock in another room or, something like that? So I feel like you have kind of 2 issues there. The first is that technologically it would be kind of a cumbersome solution to get people over there. It would also dramatically raise the cost of the dock because you'd
Yeah.
have to have some type of video processor and wireless in the dock that is proprietary. And then 3, you have to get over the hurdle of explaining how that works to your users, because the 3 of us on the panel, like we're all big time gamers. Like we love this stuff and we obsess over it. The people Nintendo wants to sell this to are not us because they know we'll buy it already. But you're talking about like an 8-year-old kid or something like that, like that is going to have to lean on their parents who maybe don't play games to help set this all up. And you're just going to frustrate the hell out of people if it doesn't work like perfectly every time. So as much as I think that's a super cool idea, I just don't see it being a realistic one just for all those reasons I just mentioned.
I think it's worth mentioning, like, the last 2 consoles in a row, Nintendo had like a feature that sounds really cumbersome, like docking the Switch or the Wii U gamepad at all. And they made both of those work. The dock especially is just like a really seamless experience. Like you put the Switch in the dock and now it's on the TV, and it takes like not even a second for that to happen. So I have some faith in Nintendo in making features like that as simple as possible. But you are right. Like you're asking a little bit more than the act of putting a device in another device, or in the case of the Wii U, turning it on.
But there's still so many features that I feel it would benefit, like Steve was mentioning with the DS, like having the top screen show up on TV and the bottom screen on the Switch itself. The Wii U gamepad had already been able to do that. The playing any DS game on the Wii U, there's like 7 different window configurations, from like having the window smaller on the side from top or bottom screen to holding it upright, or having the whole entire touchscreen be on the bottom and the TV have be the top screen. So there's so much that they can do with that kind of technology. But yeah, as far as like what the dock is going to do, they really need to simplify it and just kind of, for lack of a better word, just kind of dumb it down so that everyone understands on the base level of how this works, how it functions, and why you want to have this over the Switch 2 or the Switch 1 rather.
Yeah, I am confident Nintendo will make that happen, especially, with all these leaks. It seems like the platform name is Nintendo Switch 2. They do seem to be focused on making this as clear as possible, as to not repeat the mistake of the Wii U's branding. So I have some confidence there with Nintendo. But it's not the only like feature people are debating about right now. We have learned that there is what appears to be an optical sensor on the rail of the Joy-Con, suggesting that you could possibly use it like a mouse. And I think that's really cool.
That's exactly the kind of thing where nobody really ever thought of it, but Nintendo is crazy enough to just go for it. And when you think about it conceptually, I think a lot of us have already tried it. To pull the Joy-Con on the side and just kind of move it around, it's not that bad. I can see how it can work, because now all of a sudden, the shoulder buttons are your clicker. They're your mouse clicks.
Yeah, this is an interesting thing, and when I think about it, I can't think of any other reason why that's there. But I also think about, I don't know about y'all, but how I play in docked mode. And I'm assuming maybe this is strictly like a tabletop mode thing, but like when I think about playing in docked mode, I'm sitting on a couch, like, you know, without a mouseable surface nearby. And so I wonder how Nintendo positions this feature. And I assume it's just going to be like they show people in tabletop mode playing with a mouse, like in and again, the game I keep coming back to is, oh, that's Metroid. That's a Metroid Prime 4 feature. Like, you're launching the console with Metroid Prime 4 and you're like, on Switch 1, you know, you can use gyro with the Joy-Con or you can do this. But on Switch 2, you can use a friggin' mouse, boy, and you can move and you can shoot. Like, when I think about playing Metroid Prime 4 that way, it is incredibly exciting to me. However, Metroid Prime 4 is going to be a game I want to play on my TV. And so do I have to get like a table? Like, do I have to bring like a little surface that I can mouse around on?
They sure did sell you a piece of plastic on the Super Nintendo with your SNES mouse to use as a mouse pad. And the weirdo like part of Nintendo, like, I feel like that's going to happen again.
It has to, right? Like, I've already tried it where you have like, I've taken like a book or any flat surface, just put it on your lap and then put this there to it. It's very comfortable. It just feels very natural. And that's exactly the kind of accessory that I feel like Nintendo would sell along with this sort of thing. Just a piece of plastic on your lap, something that you can kind of comfortably fit on there for long sessions. And I mean, it's that easy. It's just a hunk of something flat that you can add on there.
I have another suggestion.
Ooh.
This is our new Nintendo Labo kit. It is a flat piece of cardboard, and that's it.
Nintendo Labo mouse pad.
Oh my god!
The more I think about the mouse, the more it makes sense to me. Like Daniel showed, when you're putting the Joy-Con on a flat surface, your thumb now has access to a joystick, 4 face buttons. Your finger has access to a bumper and a trigger, and on the new Switch, a third button, which we know is which we assume is the magnetic release button, but might also serve a secondary purpose when in this mode. And I think about that, and I'm like, if I have the left Joy-Con in my left hand and the right Joy-Con in mouse mode on my right hand, I have access to so many inputs. Like, it's a very flexible solution. It's essentially a gaming mouse, which has a bunch of buttons on it, but with a joystick. And all of that together would make for a very interesting gaming experience.
You know, one thing that I find interesting about this solution, too, and it's a non-gaming purpose, but it would make navigating a responsive eShop so much nicer.
Point and click.
Yeah, exactly. Like, I don't love using my Pro Controller to navigate through the eShop, even on its best day. It would be really nice to have a mouse and just scroll through and click games. You know, I think it would make getting to and finding games a whole lot easier.
Yeah, all of a sudden the stick is like your scroll wheel. There's so many different ways that they can implement different aspects of this. You suddenly free up the second stick for anything that's like point and shoot. So Metroid Prime, again, for example, for Metroid Prime 4, you can, again, like with the GameCube, you can just use the right stick to assign your beam weapons, because now you move freely with the pointer itself. There's a lot of open possibilities with this control scheme now.
You said scroll wheel, and it brought me back to Sakurai and his desire to have scroll buttons instead of shoulder buttons. And I'm like, that's perfect. This is what it was made for.
So that's what he's working on right now. He's living his dream.
I do wonder if this would be a good, because Sakurai kind of hinted at Kid Icarus Uprising coming back. I wonder if this would be what he was waiting for. Like, when you think about it, pointer controls for Uprising would be amazing.
Yeah, that scheme would be made for it. You solve almost all the problems by having this control scheme for it all of a sudden.
I was already thinking like twin stick gyro was going to be a great way to play that game, but mouse mode, that sounds awesome. Oh man, this is one of those leaks that's like so weird that it has to be true, but it's also the kind of leak that I will be devastated if it's not true.
Yeah, we're in an interesting position because we've seen so much of the hardware that it's hard to believe that it's inaccurate at this point.
Yeah.
We were talking about this before we started recording, but OnLeaks, which is a Twitter account that mainly leaks cell phones, like that leaks smartphone information, posted their own render of the Switch 2. And this guy, OnLeaks in particular, he doesn't miss. Like he is known for his accuracy. And, he posts renders that are as good as what the companies themselves make, usually weeks or even months in advance of what they do. So when he comes out with a render, you know that he is acting on information he believes to be accurate. And it lines up with what you've probably seen all over social media in the last couple weeks. The black Switch with the colorful Joy-Con, like the color. We haven't even touched on that. Like the Joy-Con are black, but like depending on which side, you have either blue or orange, and the color under the sticks matches the inner portion of the magnetic railing, I guess is what I'd call it. But his renders also include an optical sensor. So at this point, it feels like a foregone conclusion that, what we're seeing here, because it's being corroborated by so many people independently of one another, and Nintendo's own soft denial, it feels like we do know, I think we have a high degree of certainty that what is being put out there is accurate.
It also feels good because, Nintendo Switch, when they pitched Switch, they were like, look at all these features from past Nintendo consoles that we've all packed into this singular device. And it's nice to know that going into the next platform, they've got some new weird thing that you can do with it. Like they're not drawing the line there. Like they're moving on, even though like this is a very iterative platform.
Yeah. It's very iterative. It's very iterative, but like they're still adding something to it that doesn't take away necessarily, even if they don't necessarily use it for a lot of things. It's still something that's really cool, and there's a lot of possibilities for Nintendo and third parties to play with and see what they come up with this kind of utility.
Yeah, I think there's some of that fun that Nintendo likes to have with their hardware. They're still introducing, like, I hesitate to call it a gimmick, but they're introducing a new gimmick at least to some degree. It is very exciting to see that Nintendo is not just taking like the Switch, but making it better, but they're also, adding new features to the hardware that will enable presumably new gameplay experiences with it. I did think about this the other day, and I'm curious to get your guys' take on this. So last night I was going through some of my games that I haven't opened up yet, and I grabbed my copy of Nintendo World Championships, like the Japanese collector's edition, and I pulled out the Famicom controllers, and they are the only NSO controllers that have a Switch 1 Joy-Con rail on them. Like everything else after that is just a USB-C port on top. And I think Nintendo may have realized they were going to, at some point, update, like change the docking mechanism for Joy-Con in an upcoming platform. Do you think they're going to re-release those NSO controllers with magnetic attachments, or maybe with no attachments at all?
I could see them doing it with no attachments, because I don't think I've ever seen a Switch in person that had the NES controllers or Famicom controllers slotted onto the Switch while in the dock, because it just looks goofy.
That it does. I've seen it before, but not like in a real person's setup, if that makes sense. Like, yeah. I've seen people do it for like a laugh, but I've never seen somebody actually like unironically put them on. And Nintendo did release, and we talked about this on the Win several episodes back, that dual charger for Joy-Con that's just USB-C powered, which I think does indicate that there will be some games that require like the IR camera, which doesn't seem to be present, or from what I've seen in the renders, at least, doesn't seem to be present on the Switch 2.
I don't believe so. It is.
No.
So if you want to play 1-2 Switch and eat a sandwich, you're going to need to keep a pair of old Joy-Con around.
Which, I mean, I guess that's totally fine, because there's so few games that actually made use of the IR sensor to begin with.
I don't think I've played any games that have. Did one of the WarioWares use it?
I think a WarioWare used it, and you had to do like rock, paper, scissors with the IR camera. But yeah, really, right. Outside of
Wii Fit Adventure will like measure your
it'll measure your heart rate.
Oh, right. Yeah.
That was a
Ring Fit Adventure, WarioWare. There's a total of, I think, 11 games that use it, but I can't name them all. It's
1-2 Switch.
1-2 Switch, Ring Fit Adventure. Several of the Labo kits used the camera for various things.
Night vision goggles. the like $5 application you can buy.
Yeah, I think
it's a non-essential feature, so it makes sense that Nintendo would not reinvest into using it, save money, put it into the optical sensor instead.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'll be curious. What do we think that the Switch 2 is going to retail for, and how close do we think we are to actually seeing it?
Well, to start with retail, I'm still feeling $399, $449 at the top.
Yeah, I was thinking that we would just have it at $399 for I wasn't considering separate SKUs. Like, what do you think a separate SKU would have, Brandon?
Nintendo, like from what we've heard from interviews and books and whatnot, Nintendo's very anti-pack-in game, despite how many times they've done it. Like, Reggie had to fight for Wii Sports to be in the box with the Wii, which is crazy to think about because, I can't imagine buying a Wii without Wii Sports. If there is like a game like Mario Kart at launch, I feel like you should release a SKU that has it in the box. Because a lot of people are just going to end up buying that anyway. They don't have to. Like, if there's going to be separate SKUs, I imagine there'll be 2 color schemes like they did the first time with the original Switch. Perhaps there's a SKU that has more storage space. I'm less confident about that. At the most, I think there's 2 SKUs. And I think it will just come down to color.
Yeah, that's kind of where I'm at too. Like, the Switch originally launched with gray Joy-Con and red and blue Joy-Con in the package. I think that we see a similar setup here. I don't think Nintendo's going to do a pack-in title because I think they're going to have... I agree with you, Brandon. We didn't really touch on it past the top of the episode, but there's going to be a new 3D Mario that launches with this thing. You absolutely don't have to put that in the box because people will buy it. I think the same is true of Mario Kart. Mario Kart 8 Deluxe's sales show that people will just turn out and buy that game. So a potential Mario Kart 9, and I am going on record, it will be 9. I think that will...
I don't.
I could just see like a little Mario Kart like drifting around the loop of the 9. But anyway, I think that we are going to see Mario Kart 9, Mario, a 3D Mario, at least within the first 3 months. I think 3D Mario is a foregone conclusion as like your big tentpole launch game. They don't have a new Zelda ready, so they're going to go with their other, arguably bigger gun, which is Mario. And then, we'll see like improvements to Breath of the Wild and stuff like that. But I think we get 2 different colors. Shipping manifest, which Famu Boards has been tracking like crazy, shows that it's almost certain that Switch 2 will contain 256 gigs of internal storage. We haven't seen anything indicating that there's a different memory module shipping, to Nintendo for presumably use in a console. So I don't think there will be an upgraded storage thing. My big question that I'm seeing, because this last couple of days, I've been seeing people claiming that Switch 2 will have an OLED display. And up until now, everybody has been saying an LCD. And I think it would be unwise to pin your hopes on an OLED display when we've been hearing LCD for months and months. But I would be dishonest if I wasn't saying I was hoping that these more recent rumors were correct.
I don't think that's happening. And I'm not even really that upset anymore that there won't be an OLED display, because I got a PlayStation Portal for Christmas, which uses an LCD screen, and it's beautiful. It's like one of the nicest LCD screens I've ever looked at. And I'm like, well, if they're going to aim for this level of quality on an LCD, I'm really not that bothered.
Yeah, I could see that. Like, I don't have many qualms about my PlayStation Portal's display. I mean, just the snob in me wants like the picture on the TV to look as good as the picture on the handheld, or vice versa. But realistically, I play my Switch, I would say probably 80% docked, 20% handheld. So this isn't going to be a big issue for me. Like I traditionally, if I'm playing a game and I know I need to be getting to bed soon, that's when handheld mode comes into play, and I'll just take it with me until I'm tired. But realistically, you know, especially considering this new Switch is supposed to have more horsepower than the Switch 1 by a significant margin, I'll probably want to see those results on the big screen more often than not.
Yeah, I have even a smaller ratio of TV to dock. Of TV to handheld. I hardly ever use my Switch for handheld, even though I have an OLED. But there's a lot of people that also feel the same way. Like most people will just significantly use a lot more of their Switch on TV docked mode than they would be handheld. And so that OLED or LCD, it really doesn't matter to some people. Like for me. So if they're using that money to power the Switch even further, then that's perfectly fine with me.
Yeah, I think if they want to target an appropriate price, then, you know, maybe that's a sacrifice they have to make, and I think that's fine.
Yeah. Currently, I mean, it's worth just noting, like all of this is based on raw conjecture. You know, there's definitely some info floating around out there, but you know, it's worth noting that even though this is as close as you can get to official confirmation, nothing is official until Nintendo posts a direct. And to that end, I think we're days away. I don't think it's long now. I think maximum like 10 days out from Nintendo talking about this, because it's to the point where it's in retailer systems. Like retailers have listings. You can go on websites and find like actual listings for the Switch 2. So I think Nintendo is seeding people with information. I think they're going to drop a trailer and say pre-orders begin today. And that's why we're seeing this stuff. And I think, yeah, it's got to be next week sometime.
Oh God, that's going to be a hellish experience, isn't it?
Yeah, I'm already clenching at the thought of pre-orders just being like an instant, here you go, Wario's going to tweet it, and bots are going to own every Switch 2 on Earth within an hour.
Do everything in my power to get an in-store pre-order at GameStop.
Yeah.
I'm probably going to pre-order it in multiple places if possible, just in case.
With Switch 1, I ended up pre-ordering 3 consoles and needing none of them, because at the time, I didn't know Nintendo would send me one to review. So I had 3 that I had to like get rid of. My best friend took one. My partner at the time took one. And then I literally just gave the one that was meant for me to like a guy from work, like just told him like, go to GameStop and pay off the pre-order and you can have it. And, but yeah, I'm going to try to get an in-store pre-order. I think that's the safest way to get one. Even though there's a part of me, I know that I will be trying to get one at midnight from whoever the hell will sell me one. I live in a small town, so they don't do midnight launches here. So I will likely just head my ass down to Walmart and try to get one like that night at 9 p.m. or whatever. But yeah, it's going to be, I think Nintendo's just going to drop the thing and pre-orders go live like within an hour or a day or whatever. And who knows when it launches after that, though. I feel like March is still the time.
I'm pretty much in agreement. I think we are days away because the leaks are so aggressive. Like, there's clearly precedence that the reveal was going to be soon because there's too much information out right now, more than we've ever seen for like a platform before. And I don't think that would be true if the reveal wasn't close.
Yeah, and we're just waiting to see when and where Nintendo's going to announce this, and we're going to be all over it, and all hell's going to break loose when they finally reveal their hand. But yeah, it'll still be exciting. Like, it's not, as I mentioned before, it's not going to take out any of the it's not going to take out any of the excitement that we have for seeing, you know, this in a much more detail in an official capacity and what software is going to come with it. So I want to see that menu UI, guys.
That's the interesting bit, because we have seen so much, and I think if this were like a PlayStation or an Xbox, I would feel completely spoiled at this point. But because it's Nintendo, and because Nintendo is so highly unpredictable, I feel like we still don't know a whole lot. Like, seeing the Switch 2 is not really the end game here. Like, it doesn't, because we all expected it to be kind of like this. I think whenever when we knew there was a Switch successor coming, we all expected it to kind of look a little like this. It's a Switch, but bigger and presumably better. And really the key will be seeing what is under the hood. Like what are the experiences we'll have with this?
I see so many people up in arms like, oh, it's going to be an 8 nanometer SoC instead of like a 4 nanometer. And there's even a chance it's actually a 5 nanometer, but I don't care. Like when it comes down to it, I just want to know how my games will look and run.
Yeah.
And if they are at a serviceable level, like if I can get 1080p 60 locked on most, if not all of my first party games, that's great. If I can get 1440p or even 4K with DLSS upscaling, that's even better. But as long as I get a locked frame rate at 60 with a 1080 output minimum, I will be just fine.
Well, the funny thing is, you think we would have learned from 2016. If people had come out in 2016 and said, you know, the NVIDIA Shield is Nintendo's next console, everybody would have been like, what? Oh my God, this is going to be terrible. Like, we're not going to, you know, this will run nothing. But, you know, we got that thing with the weakest, babiest GPU on earth in it, and it ran Breath of the Wild and Mario Kart 8. And I remember just marveling at like, this thing in my hand plays these beautiful games. And we're getting a better version of that. So honestly, like, I'm already happy because as much as I talk about technical performance of the Switch and how, yeah, games could run better on it, it's still this little baby tablet like that runs these amazing games. And we're just getting a better version of that. So I know I'm going to like it. Like I know there will be 1 or 2 Nintendo decisions in there that I will just not enjoy. But at the end of the day, it will be a handheld that runs, you know, Nintendo first party games and it runs them better than anything else before it has. So I know that there's going to be an enjoyable experience in there. I'm just waiting for Nintendo to show us like the detail of what this is.
Yeah, I'm very easy to please when it comes to performance and whatnots. I've been spoiled with games that I see performing on PS5 and whatnots, but the leap from PS4 to PS5 is so much smaller than what we could get from the leap of the Switch 1 to the Switch 2. And that itself is really exciting. I've always thought that I've been saying this is Nintendo playing the long game. Like now, performance is so marginally minimal, especially when you go from something from like the PS5 to the PS5 Pro even. I'm not one of the kind of people that are super locked in to see all the little tiny details that is different. Like I think a lot of people are. But yeah, seeing the specs for Switch 2 now, that's such a large leap that it's going to get a lot more attention, I think, from the audience that are going to be playing these games and publishers as well.
I have 2 things that I want the Switch 2 to do. I want my games to work, and I want load times to be gone. And it sounds like both of those things are going to happen. And that's really all I can ask for.
You mean I'm finally going to have to not wait a whole minute and something for Animal Crossing to start and then go to the start menu, press start, and then wait another minute to get to Isabelle?
Yeah, that's one thing we didn't touch on is that micro SD Express, which we discussed very briefly, is faster than an SSD. It's not quite as fast as what is in the PS5, which is ridiculous speed, but it is faster than like a traditional old school, you know, SATA SSD drive that you would plug into a PC, you know, if you know what a SATA cable looks like. But so it's much faster than a USB hard drive. It's much faster than some internal hard drives. And it is infinitely faster than the current SD card solution used in the Switch today. So it's like
multiple times faster, isn't it?
Yeah, it's like, I think it's roughly 10 times faster.
Yeah. This is not an insignificant upgrade. People shouldn't overlook this.
Yeah. So getting a 10 times boost in load times, like you can just imagine that would, in a lot of first party Switch 1 games, completely eliminate them. So
I might go back to Mario and Luigi Brothers ship. I might finish that game if the load times are gone.
On a side note, I've been playing that game the last couple nights and I've been finding more enjoyment with it than I thought I would. It definitely has pacing and performance issues, but if you put those aside, like there's fun to be had with that game. Like the battle system, I don't tire of at all.
It's always been fun, and it still is fun.
Oh yeah, I think it plays excellently. It's just those little gripes of load times and whatnot that people have been kind of hoping that will be solved by something like the Switch 2's enhanced performance. That a lot of us are waiting to see what's going to happen.
But as we've been saying here, I don't think we're going to be waiting too long. There's going to be the BS times, and then the AS times, the before Switch 2 and the after Switch 2. And I wouldn't be surprised if the next time we record, it will be the AS2. I'm willing to make that bet.
I would agree with you. I think we're in a position where the next episode of The Win may very well just be us gushing about the Switch 2. But if you know me, you know it's always BS time.
I do want to take this time to mention that when it comes to like breaking Nintendo news and we need to break out and do a discussion, we're going to start putting those under the Win umbrella. So like if you're a listener on podcast services, when we do discussions like that, you'll be able to hear us talk about it right in the same place that you do right now. So hopefully that makes it a little bit easier for you. It brings a little unity to the week of Nintendo. So now when something big happens, ba-bam, we're here. It might not be limited to this panel, just limited to whoever's here at the time, but I just wanted to bring up that clarification for you now, so that when you want to hear us talk Nintendo, it's all in the same exact place. But speaking of that place, Steve, can you tell people how to join our Winner's Circle?
Absolutely. If you like what we're doing here at the Week in Nintendo, or more broadly here at GVG, you can join the Winner's Circle for as little as $5 a month over at patreon.com/gvgaming. That gives you early access to each and every episode of The Win on Patreon. It gives you access to live audience discussions and a whole host of other perks. Feel free to join us in the Winner's Circle over there. Gives you access to our exclusive Discord as well. Again, patreon.com/gvgaming. And we'd love to have you. It would be great for you to come listen to us just that one day early. It also lets you submit Patreon topics. So we do mailbags on most episodes of the Week in Nintendo. This week we had too much to discuss to really do a mailbag, but if you want to submit those, our Winner's Circle is how you do it.
All right, everyone. Thank you so much for hanging out with us. We will see you next time, whether or not there's a Switch 2 to talk about.
Please.
Oh, there will be a Switch 2 to talk about. Whether it's an official reason to talk about it, that remains to be seen. But thanks for hanging out with us. Happy New Year, by the way. And we will see you next time. Thank you so much for listening. Keep the games good and the vibes greater. Bye now.